hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's grand podcast, episode 161, where we talk every week about what we think about stuff and figure it all out, and it's sort of therapy, and it's also live. Amazing. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Majic.
Did you think it was weird how I said amazing just then? Amazing.
No, I was still processing 161 episodes.
161,000 hours.
Episodes of us talking to each other and recording it, putting it on the internet.
I can't wait for
so that our friends can listen.
I can't wait for Google DeepMind to mine that content to recreate us as bots.
We're going to do some good deep fakes.
Well, they could probably just probably just use real footage. They don't even need the deep fake. I don't know. Do you think someone could do an impression of either of them? I don't think they would. I was listening to Dana Carvey's Joe Biden impression on Stephen Colbert this morning. It was very funny. Very funny. I would recommend it. Right, this week we're talking about Dom's big plan. What was it all for? So Dominic Cummings, he sat down in front of that committee, and my face has disappeared. He sat down in front of the committee, and he talked about what he was trying to do and how he was going to save the country. Like what his big plan was, basically, to sort of I don't know, the thing he wanted to make this entity within this funding mechanism that was less bureaucracy and blah blah blah. And we're going to just sort of. I watched it all. We're just going to sort of talk through it. We're going to react.
I didn't watch it all.
Ivanka definitely watched it all too.
I watched the first bit on 1.75 speed and then got caught up in how slow he normally speaks. But anyway.
I watched it in real time.
Wow.
Not in real, real speed. We're also going to react to some critique of it. That Ivanka shared with me last week. So, what was this all for, Dominic? What was this Brexit all for? What was this removal of bureaucracy, Brussels' nightmarish bureaucracy really all for? Let's figure that out. I guess that's...
big themes.
Any thoughts on that theme before we go into the titles?
No, I'm looking forward to hearing all about it.
Okay, well, let's transition into the credits. How's it going, Ivanka? How are you doing? How's your week?
Very quiet then. My week has been a week. Another week. Bit of bad news. One of my cousins is in hospital with COVID, which is not really what I was quite ready for. But many people are in the same situation as me. So it does make it anyway. So that's happening this week, and there's somebody who's ill anyway, so it's not very good news. And that's left me a little bit shocked, I suppose, this week.
Now, right?
Well, he went in and was put on oxygen on Wednesday.
Right.
And then his situation has deteriorated to a respirator this morning. So, I don't know. I did anyway. So that's the kind of the background theme to my week. Other than that, it is actually a pleasant week. The weather has improved. We've had a week of very, very cold north wind, which is kind of nice, but it dries everything out. So even though it's spring, I'm saying even though it's spring, I am new to this climate. I have to water the garden an awful lot, which kind of shocks me. It's like watering the garden in March. What on earth? So I'm doing that. And then, I feel like I've had nice things happen this week, but they've been overshadowed. But I have been looking forward to talking to you. And one of the thoughts I did have, which I'll throw in now because I forgot earlier, I was walking around because I talked to my daughter about being kind and, one way to deal with people that aren't very nice to you is actually to be nice to them. And then they might learn that nice is cool. And I was thinking about whether or not we pick on Dom a bit too much.
Oh, poor Dom. Poor Dom.
Poor Dom. I was like, are we picking on him?
For Dave
yeah,
instead?
but anyway.
with his trotters up.
There you go. So, how has your week been, Michael?
How was my week? My week has been the sun's been out again, but as I mentioned I was going to do last week, I deleted my laptop and downgraded from the latest Apple operating system to the previous one, which was, that was hours and hours of anxiously staring at progress bars and wondering if it's backed up and if I've got all my files and if I'm going to lose them over the weekend. But it went pretty smoothly in the end, and it's just like I can work again without wading through treacle, and it's exciting. So just
what was it doing to you?
It was constantly like high kernel task or Windows server high CPU usage, which just means it's messed up.
So what was it? Fan whirring?
The fan's going and it's just laggy, and I'm clicking on things and it's not happening, or it like really would start like if I was streaming and doing something and doing some programming, sometimes it would just like grind to a halt and just like the frames would just go. So sorry, on the same subject of worry fans and things, I saw a tweet from an ex-chronicler to Slack HQ saying, you seem to be using all my CPU and I have to keep stopping it and starting it, but I've got a really high spec machine, blah, blah. And then he put, so he sort of explained it, and then the bottom says brackets, or are you secretly mining Bitcoin? Which I thought was quite funny. But no, and I said that and nobody reacted to my hilarity. I think Apple was secretly mining Bitcoin on my laptop. That's the only explanation. That's what the kernel task actually is. Head Shoot Man says, we have a postman who is usually really rude. The more rude he is, the more polite we are. He is always shocked by that. So there you go.
I think that's true. See, it's a power for good.
It's a power for good.
But sometimes hard to do.
I can't. I don't know, like I've got like charm mode available, but it's very rarely deployed. Let's go into... So, Dominic Cummings, poor bullied Dominic Cummings. No, come on, this is a guy that was responsible for a lot of badness. Thank you very much. So I don't mind. I don't know. We should wish love. We should wish him well, wish him to be happy, but we should also go, Dom,
mate,
come on.
It's like... So what did you learn from listening to his evidence?
So the crux of it seems to be, in the 60s, was it the 60s? America had this thing called, I've actually written down some notes. America had this thing, ARPA, which was like a sort of low friction way of the government funding like high risk, interesting, high tech projects. And his thing is, and that led to the invention of the internet, and I want to do that. I want to do a thing that leads to the invention of the next internet, and I want to cut through all the bureaucracy and just have, like he says, no process in the 60s. General Groves just handed out 2% of GDP with just a handshake, no lawyers or anything. And then the Pentagon brought in laborious processes, and that led to all the cronyism, blah, blah, blah. This wasn't cronyism. This was just handshake deals and going around the country and finding interesting projects, and that's why they invented the internet, blah, blah, blah. Dom wanted to set up that sort of funding mechanism within, some sort of skunkworks government agency, where they could basically generate trillions in future wealth by inventing something like the internet. So that was sort of the crux of what he wants, and the whole the question and answer was all about like, and what, how far did you get, and what were the problems, and it was agreed, but then once the money people want to do all these things and double count spending and blah blah blah, and like they sort of start to bring in all of this. We want it to be like a really small board of 4 people at the most, and then you just decide and you give people funding and you just let them go off, and we want weirdos, right? His whole thing.
Oh yeah, that was his whole weirdos.
We select for weirdos, then we'll invent the internet, kind of thing. So that was about the size of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And what? I was just
there were some good questions from people.
Yeah,
I quite liked Catherine Fletcher.
Chair.
Such a creaky chair, and I can no longer remove it. Although it was hard at the best of times. Catherine, I was quite impressed with. Well, it seemed like the questions were sensible. Like this, Catherine Fletcher came in and was like, sort of asking, sort of saying that it's going to be mostly blokes, isn't it? And it's going to be, at least kind of coming in with some of that. And his sort of reactions. Well, I thought her questions were quite good. She came in sort of talking about, it sounds like a sort of skunkworks model. But then I wasn't really impressed with his answers to anything. I don't really feel like he even did a particularly good job of pushing his own agenda in those conversations. So I don't know, really. It was strange.
Well, I mean, I think what it's a bit of a funny one, isn't it, when people put this up. I watched the opening and had a giggle about the speed at which he speaks, which I shared with you on Slack at the time. I did
not notice that he spoke so much, to be honest. I just
was
noticed
like,
that
mate, just get to the point.
I just noticed that he says he's sort of got this slight kind of northern tinge or whatever, but then he still sort of says the issues, and you're like, you're posh. Stop trying to pretend not to be posh.
So I listened to that, but then he was talking about the whole sort of science buried and innovation buried in papers, because you're measuring the number of papers published. And I think there are plenty of very sensible and still measurable and not skunkworks way of doing projects that are outcomes rather than output measured. That's what he's talking about, like measuring the wrong thing. And the thing that and again, my comments are off superficial listening to a small amount, but it's like, have you got loads of noise in your background?
Have I got loads of noise? I don't think so.
I could hear something like a car, maybe. Sorry, hello, podcast. But anyway, was this whole sort of like, I totally agree with him that lots of science is buried in papers, PDFs, published papers. But the thing about those published papers is what they represent is peer-reviewed findings. So instead of it being the four, which probably would be geezers, and that was my initial response when you were describing your thing, it probably would be, a board of four white, well-connected white men who could go and shake hands and do a deal. That sounds like that, but it would be that peer review has benefits, and I think and that's, I mean, peer review is critical to good science, isn't it? Like the difference between somebody kind of doing, and I think he could do with some peer review. Personally, he could really do with a bit of like collaboration with people that come at things from a slightly different angle to him. And I do think he just listening to your summary and some of the bits that I've read on his blog before, it's like he does suffer a bit from confirmation bias. I think I am right because Bletchley Park or something. It's like, all right, mate. You are wrong because of the whole of science.
And in his defence, he did say there should be diversity on this. It shouldn't all be white men, but of course, at least he said that. But I think there was and the first thing I wrote next to this, this General Groves in the 60s, that he was only shaking hands with white men, right? He was going around meeting white men, shaking hands with them and letting them go off and do their own thing. He was not and
what white privileged men don't need any more of is permission to do whatever the fuck they want. It's like without any checks and balances. It's like, do you know what I mean? It's like, excuse me. It's like, okay, let them have their little board, but then they must be answerable to a board of completely different people. So it's like, so I think it's a bit of a, he sort of, I think he suffers a bit from that. Justifying his opinions based on stuff he already knows rather than seeking to challenge himself. And look at the vaccine now, the vaccine inventing that has been going on. I know everything's descended into a shitstorm of competing commercial interests and politics. But for the last year, the reason we've had this accelerated discovery of new vaccines is because of collaboration. Because of the lack that they've removed bureaucracy in a whole different way by opening up collaboration between scientists.
And there's a basic sort of conservative assumption to all of it, which is that we need to gain some sort of competitive advantage over other countries instead of looking at science for what it is, which we should be sort of collaborating globally and collaborate. The EU is this sort of block that can fund the sorts of science that a single country could probably never dream of. But he sort of wants to go for that, like, but some of the stuff you can do is a small. It's kind of like, I want to be Instagram versus Oracle kind of thing. It's that mentality, but like, but I also thought he did quite a bad job of defending that because as soon as the questions start coming in, it's all like, but what about the oversight? What about the oversight? How are we going to have oversight? And then this thing of like, it's got to be allowed. The only way it works is if you waste a lot of money. Right? Waste a lot of time, or certainly spend a lot of time on failed experiments. Like, that's the only way this is ever going to work, if you allow people to make a lot of mistakes. And as soon as you bring in this idea of, it'll be reviewed after 3 months and 4 months and 5 months, then you sort of like, you're going against the grain of that whole idea before you even get started. And I think he didn't do a particularly good job of raising that point with the people that needed to hear it. But at the same time, He also talked about like how impossible it was to get even this little thing through all the bureaucracy that exists, because he was in like the seat of power and still couldn't even get his little kind of funding project of whatever, like £50 million or whatever it was.
But I think, if you think about what happened, like the Gov UK project is an example, a living, breathing example of a successful, what started off, as far as I can understand, as a sort of over here in the corner skunkworks thing that then has changed the way a load of digital transformation happened in government. And there are valid criticisms that can be attributed to sort of, agile doesn't work everywhere and some things need longer term strategies and blah, 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 all of that. But they got a lot of shit done and still were answerable to ministers, to finances, and a lot of work got done. The digital marketplace project I worked on, we that's all about working on how to make it easier for people in government to buy nimble IT, not get tied into long contracts. There are, so I don't know. He seems to potentially as well suffer from a little bit of not invented here.
Yeah, exactly. It's
like, it's not my idea. My idea, you know what I mean? It's like,
but also like with that, like there is already a sort of overbearing obsession with improving efficiency in the current system, and it's paying off here and there, but it's also doing damage in quite a lot of places as well. So here's like, it's too bureaucratic and too inefficient to do things. It's kind of fine, right? Like, it's kind of...
Well, I will always go back. I had this a few years ago. In fact, David Siegel's sister I was talking to. We used to work with David. He's very clever. His sister's also very clever. She was studying it's like health policy or something. And I met her and we were just talking. I was like, some NHS came up and I was like, of course the NHS is a big organisation. There are inefficiencies. And she was like, and I just sort of said that as without any real knowledge, just accepted perceived wisdom. And she was like, well, actually, no, I study health systems and health services. And the NHS, sort of, if you look at it from the outside, is a very efficient organisation in terms of, just look what they're doing with rolling out the vaccines. It's like, do you know what I mean? So it's like, what are you measuring? What is inefficient? What is I don't know.
He just wants to invent the internet. He just wants that to be his legacy, that he invented the internet.
Can't he save the planet?
Well,
can't he get behind
in theory,
something?
That's the sort of thing that this thing would be funding, right? I think that's it's all part of it. Is it because he sort of was cagey about sort of talking about any specifics of what they would be, but it sort of seems like quantum computers, environmental solutions, and things like that would definitely be a part of it, like probably crypto, this and that. Oh, we're going to invent a NFT thing. But definitely, the one other thing that he said, like, it was all about. One thing, I think he's got this idea that weirdos are the people, and we saw the sort of job thing or whatever that went out last year, or the year before. I can't remember. Time has no meaning. But I think you're not looking for weirdos. There's lots of weirdos with not
opinions.
A lot of there's a lot of sort of tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists that would probably, to someone that doesn't know, be indistinguishable from your next internet inventor. I really wanted to be able to just smoothly flow into that guy, and it didn't come. But he just talks about that whoever's in charge of it will have good taste. Well, they'll have good taste in making these decisions. And it sort of came back to that, and I just think he doesn't realise that that's code for he'll pick white people.
I think I'll be having this conversation forever, in part because of thinking about this, and this is a relevant point, but I'm just trying to work out where my starting point is. So efficient fillers. So I've been writing this whole, how to do user research book, and you start talking about how to do qualitative analysis of data. And qualitative analysis of data, on the surface of it, just looks like, because one of my friends said, oh, you're really good at spotting patterns, and that's what you do, you spot patterns. But you can't spot patterns unless you've got a whole heap of models and experience of what sort of patterns prove to be useful in the world. And one of the differences between an experienced somebody at something and somebody who lacks knowledge and experience or is new to something is that they can't distinguish between, I think, this is my working theory, it's like data that is relevant and data that's just noise or irrelevant. And I think by, what may appear like, we've worked with some amazing people, you're one of those highly knowledgeable, creative technology people. And when one talks to you in a project level, it is entirely possible to conclude that you're some kind of weirdo that pulls things out of nowhere. And it's probably similarly possible to conclude that with me. Well, I hope it is. But it's like, but that's come from years and years of doing something and getting good at it.
Yeah.
Do you know, rather than just being like contrary.
Yes.
Just for the sake of it, or argumentative. Or I don't like that because
playing devil's advocate about things. We go around going, look, I've been down that road, 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 and I'm bringing these ways of looking at all this information to sort of try and make the best of your money, of your time.
But it's like, totally. And it's like, okay, I'm very happy to have. I mean, I work with people now who are first jobbers. We've just been working for the last year and a half with the digital apprenticeship. First job, no experience. So her opinions are valid in a meeting. We listen, we discuss them, but she's never tried to be contrary just for shits and giggles, which I think there's something like you do need to actually respect people's knowledge and experience and education, challenge it by all means, but don't dismiss it. Right, that's what I say.
Is that what? Sorry, how he was?
That's what I feel like. That's what I feel like when he talks about weirdos, is that he doesn't understand that, like, that sort of, I'm not sure he recognizes that weirdos, that I think he means, like, I think he means people who are good at stuff, but he's like interpreting it as people who are like he's oversimplifying the idea of somebody, anyway.
And also it's like, it's such a, like,
I'm not making
anything that you're not anything that you don't have a lot of a depth of knowledge in can look weird, but to the people within that field, there's nothing weird about it. Like, loads of stuff to me is a whole system of thinking about things, but if someone else just drops by, they're like, what the hell is all this? And that doesn't make me a weirdo that has any special. It just means that like it's not interesting because it's weird. It's weird because you don't know anything about it yet. So I don't know what how this taste is supposed to align. Like if you don't know what you're looking at, then how are you supposed to make decisions about it?
What is taste? Why does anyone make a decision based on their taste?
Well, I think he's sort of trying to say like it's not a checklist, although he does love checklists. So I don't know why he wouldn't have a checklist. I think he wants to say like there's a bit more opinion, a bit more room for kind of like informed opinions or whatever. But I think it's a shorthand. But
yeah, I think that sounds like that whole. We've talked about this, that whole genius needs to come and find you working type thing, or inspire, oh no, that guy is so amazing, he just designs stuff. It's like, I haven't got time. I think we've picked that apart in other conversations.
Let's a little bit of weird music and out of my window. So we're going to look at Simon Wardley's thread on this.
Right.
So I've got it up and it says X. Did you see? So he does. He has this form of X, I guess, asking a question. Is that a real conversation? I don't know. Did you see the Cummings interview? And then he said, Gove's lapdog spreading shade on Hancock, the Department of Health and the NHS. Sad. We need a full and wide-ranging public inquiry. But ARIA, which is the thing that he wants to make, the application of different methods, whether project management or purchasing or economic, depending upon the context of what we're doing. I'm hardly going to disagree with that, but it's pointless hot air without an understanding of context, i.e. if you don't have any maps, you'll mess this up. And he's got a lot of pictures. I could even put them up on screen for what it's worth. But in fact, maybe I'll... Oh, God, I'm going to just fiddle. This is probably a mistake. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. But I mean, he brings up the example of so like there's different ways of changing things. There's different methods. But I think that so he brings up the example of GDS, which used spend control to stop things going too far. You had to prove quickly that the money that you were asking for was for something, and there were some sort of proof points that blocked waste.
Yeah.
But what I think Simon's brought up here is that, like, by mapping out all the different things, you start understanding the context of the decision. So you're not just picking up the data points that make your case. And I think that's where Cummings lets himself down massively,
right.
Because that's my view on him, is that he just, like, if it's not already on his radar, then he's not interested.
Yeah, he's not bothered.
And I think that's just weak.
He's got
frankly.
He's got this whole thing of like, and as we keep coming back to, like, he's got this idea that if he doesn't know about it, then it's not, it doesn't count.
It's not, it hasn't. If I haven't encountered it, then it can't possibly matter.
So I have actually put this up on the screen. So Simon Wardley. So he's got these visual maps here. So like use appropriate, and he's sort of like contrasting Six Sigma thinking outsourced to utility suppliers. I think this is like American business type thing, right? I seem to recognize it from 30 Rock. Jack, what's his face in 30 Rock, is a Six Sigma. So he's all like, oh, we should do just off-shelf. And then the other end of that being like engineers and, well, off-the-shelf products and lean, and then build in-house with agile techniques, and uncharted versus industrialized. And he sort of like dumps in these pictures that I don't really understand. And then there are sort of, but then he says, I don't disagree with Cummings on the need, but if you don't understand how to use multiple methods, then you'll just mess this up.
Well, yeah, what Simon said. That's what it's like. You've got to know enough to do. You can't just go, I saw this, therefore. You've got to have a little thing. And I think there absolutely has to be room in government, in any industry, in your family to go, hang on a minute, is there a different way of doing this? And but you can't like let everyone be hungry in the meantime, or trample over previous things that did or didn't work, or understand why they did or didn't work. Even models, even that 60s model in America, would that work today in exactly the same format? Maybe it worked very well with a white, heavily patriarchal, laid out society. Would it work in the context of, and I think post-war America had a higher standard of living than it does. Do you know what I mean? There's loads of
there's definitely
factors that are different or that need to be considered. And she says, waving her hands. If you watch the video, you get to see me waving my hands around a lot.
And Cummings does have a tendency to harp on about his little pet things that he's learnt about. We saw in the blog he's always talking about his checklists. If they just had a simple system of checklists, everything would be fine. Okay, Dom. Okay, I'm sure it would be great. So then he says you can hear the future failing being set up in Dominic Cummings' own words when he talks of two competing factions, the let it free versus the bureaucracy. It's the old bimodal problem. From circa 2004, the competing faction is because of the missing middle. This and the constant flip-flop between one-size-fits-all extremes is because of a lack of understanding of context. The whole pioneer settler town planner model was designed to solve this. So, I mean, I don't know anything about these models and where they come from and who he's talking about. Do you?
Do I? Not all of them. No, I'm not familiar with all of them. But like each point is backed up with something.
Yeah. So
do you know, like
this map of his. This is this pioneer. So it's got like Genesis on the left, evolutionary flow going in an arrow to the right. A Genesis custom built, team 1, team 8, bespoke coverage, and then this product kind of thing coming through from product to and rental to commodity. But I think he's saying like it's not one side or the other. It's you create this town square and then you sort of have a much more sophisticated way of thinking about these problems. But if you just harp on about how bureaucracy is bad and so we've got to have Brexit to get rid of Brussels because Brussels equals bureaucratic, then you're just not really, like he says, like he's being set up to fail in the future. Yeah, and then so he says to do this you have to have a significant set of principles in place within the organisation, and that's the problem I find with Dominic. And what are Dom's principles? Like less government, better borders. I don't know.
Well, I think I'm still stuck on the one size fits all idea, right. Or like that you've not got enough models. Like when you're dealing with government is not the place to be, rolling out the welfare state is not the place to be dealing with bleeding edge technology. It has to be proven technology. You can't have, I don't know, some basic thing tripping you up. You can't have hoverboards or something. You know what I mean? You've got to keep it realistic. Right. But if you're thinking about a whole different way of inventing a vaccine at really short notice because of a pandemic, then you get to play with everything all in one go. Yeah. Until it's time to start testing it, then you have to go and making sure it's safe. Then you have to go back to proven, trusted models. Yeah. And that like there's you can even in the development of one thing, there are still places where you can go create, like, the kind of here's some money, play with it, the freedom, do what you like, give the money to clever people and talk about outcomes and don't worry about what they're doing with it. Yeah. And then, so to me, that's what Wardley's sort of critique amounts to. It's like, but there's 20 other ways of doing it. So let's think about appropriateness.
Yeah, so just chill and like you don't have, your thing is fine, but it's like it's very reductive and it's very silly, and it also sort of falls into this trap that I find a lot of this sort of person fall into, which is that like new technology is automatically going to solve all the problems. It's all about whatever the bleeding edge technology is. Oh, I've got to get the latest thing in order to solve these problems. And I think it's like a white man problem. Like, I think it's definitely something I see in the sort of VC types and those, they all want to hear about, is it using NFTs? Is it using quantum computing? But actually, as you say, like you put it as you've got to use proven technology. The way I think about it is like, there is so much scope, for using technology that is mature at this point, that is not being employed, certainly at a government level yet. Just a decent database, like just a decent.
It's like that tweet that says, "I can track my sandwich across the bridge, but I don't know when my next A&E patient is going to arrive." Yeah, like it's that sort of like, we're not yet applying existing proven technologies to government life or health service life. We don't need to go bleeding edge. We don't need to invent any new stuff. I think there's also a possibility of a bit of having a vision, but sort of, maybe he is a visionary. Let's say that he's got a vision. Imagine. Okay, great. Yeah. He's got a vision. You cannot dictate the vision and how to fulfill the vision. You have to set the vision and create the circumstances for the implement. It's like, outcome versus outputs. It's one of the things that I suffered with at Canonical. It's like you're telling me what you do, but also how to do it, what you want, but also how to get there. It's like, I can't do that. You've either got to set up the vision and give me the opportunity to deliver on that, or you can tell me what you want me to do on a daily basis, and then the output will be whatever it turns out to be if I follow that method.
Which comes back to the criticism about, it's about values. It has to sort of come from a system of values ultimately, and then you sort of find what is going to work to deliver that. Unfortunately, as sort of evidenced by this whole thing from Cummings, his values are these conservative ideas that some people are just better than other people and should be given free rein to do whatever they want. And if you don't buy into that, if you know that that's not what it is, it's discrimination and legacy and poverty and all these things feed into these problems that it sort of looks like certain people are geniuses, but we always kind of divorce that from the entire, like, all the privilege that kind of got them to that point. And that is the sort of the blindness that this conservative outlook has so much of the time. Like, it's not as simple as there's a genius and he invented the internet. Ever.
No. I think you've put that very eloquently, and I have nothing to add. I was nodding along like,
all right,
what
let me
Michael
just
said.
Go clip. Woodlands there. The other thing I was just going to mention was, like, well, sort of looking back at Simon's thing. I've actually put it up on the screen on the stream, but it always seems to come back to picking the right people, and that sort of reminds me of this, like, Scrum is going to solve all your problems, Agile is going to solve all your problems, Lean is going to, all these sort of project management techniques. It always tends to come back to, well, it doesn't work unless you have smart people on the team. Unless you have the right people on the team.
This is where I massively agree with a whole bunch of the, GDS Kool-Aid, which is about the unit of delivery is the team. Right. And it's like, it's the team that you need to be right. And it's not about clever individuals. It's about a really good, strong team that knows how to challenge each other, argue with each other, support each other, be nice to it, all the things you need to get really quality debates and discussions.
And people confuse the process that team happens to find useful with the reason that it's successful. Whereas, really, it's just like they could have probably picked another one and it would have been fine, or a different one would be useful for a different situation. And they're just,
it's always, in my view, down to if you've got a team that respects each other and works well enough together to go, hang on a minute. That sounds not what I thought, or like, I think you're wrong, kind of, then you just don't get anything good.
Yeah. And
That's
really,
it, really.
where it is so much more interesting than let's find a maverick that knows everything is once you are forced to bring in diversity into those teams, which is not even uncommon. Well, I think it'll probably pay lip service to it, but the best way we can improve is to sort of have more different sets of experiences going into these things, because, well, on any level, whether it's like one person knowing some different technology or it's people from different backgrounds of whatever sort kind of coming into a room together and not ending up with an Apple situation where you have a health app that doesn't have any concept of menstruation included in it in the first release.
Yeah.
So I think that to me, when people start banging on about technology, and when my dad buys me, he just buys me these science books, like pop science books every year. Like, it's like, here's the universe, the end of the Big Bang, the heat death of the blah, quantum this and that. Like, and I've started to get like, I am so much more interested. I'm sort of tired. I'm so much more interested in the guilty feminist and like those other things like that, ContraPoints and all these people that are showing me completely different perspectives and making me see how the stuff that I thought was objective is really like a certain perspective and a certain like amount of privilege to be able to kind of, Whitey's on the moon. Like, this kind of smacks of that Gil Scott Heron poem. He's like rat done, but I don't want to do an impression of Gil Scott Heron, but like he's sort of complaining about poverty whilst looking up at the news and like there's a white man on the moon, so why can't I pay my rent? Like, and I think it's just more of that. At the end of the day, it's like, oh well, let's have some innovators and some people, and they'll make trillions, and then it'll be amazing. Yeah, but no, like you'll solve so many more problems by sort of addressing poverty and addressing all that discrimination, because you'll bring all these new voices to life. And I just think, like, why not do universal basic income, and then everybody gets a little tinker time? You don't have to just select 6 people to get £1 million each. Everybody starts being able to follow what they're interested in. I think you'd get, I know some science does need a bit of investment, but like, that's what the EU's for.
Or I think there's I don't have anything. It's like, yes, I agree. I'm just sitting here thinking, wow, okay, that's good. Let's do that. He's like, because I think it's like, I agree, Michael, and I think it's like, I'm agreeing. Ivanka's agreeing with Michael Day. I was just thinking about whether or not we would have been having the same conversation 15 years ago.
No, I mean,
either you or me.
Right.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so there is a bit of, I think, So
we're learning, as the years go by, we're sort of getting the hang of it a bit more, and we're sort of going.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, come on, like this, and I used to buy into that meritocracy idea, and I used to think, oh, I'm successful because I work hard. I get to be rude to people at work because I'm very clever. No, it's kind of that, but it's mostly, this is very pale in colour, and I have a sort of relatively posh accent, so I can get away with this stuff. Oh, I seem to just be able to, this guy just gave me this rental because he thought I could build him an app. Yeah. And also, I just like have all these privileges that are invisible to me, and I just think it's anyway. I don't want to start harping on about that because it's it's like broken record. But like to see someone so blind to all of that, like fertile, but to me is the most fertile area now.
The most frustrating thing to me is somebody that is fundamentally like not stupid.
Yeah.
But to have such a glaring blind spot is amazing.
And do you know? I'm actually I'm gonna take it to the YouTube comments on this, because there was I saw one comment which was like, if there were more people like this in government, the world would be a much better place. And I was like, yeah, I see why you think that, but you're wrong.
That is a well-made argument, Michael.
It would stagnate. I think it would lead. It's the path of, and also I'm just feeling like I do want to start, instead of saying, I think the conservative outlook is it's left versus right, but I think we need to push this. It's progressive versus conservative. It's people who want things to stay the same as they are versus people that are looking for ways to make things better for everybody. Like progressive, we've got to move forward. We've got to let things change. Conservative is no, things are working just fine for me and I don't want them to change. And to do that, you have to ignore the problems of vast sections of society. So I think if there were more people, so it's like this, if there were more people like Cummings involved in government, the country would be an unrecognisably better place. And then someone says lol to that.
Same quality of argument that you just, no, you are wrong. But I also think that's a valid argument. Anyway, go.
I mean, these are YouTube comments, so they're going to be toxic, like Cummings for PM. Where are his glasses? Brexit nightmare. Who created that, I wonder? Put the boot in, Dom, and make sure you're wearing your steelies. Cummings, one would rush onto the field of battle after his hostilities are over and shoot his own sides, wounded as they clearly let him down. Representative politics is dead. All these MPs who back lockdown seem to have horrible houses. Poor them.
Oh my God.
I could not trust anything that DC says. Dominic Cummings is now a cross-dresser judge. Okay, whatever. This is YouTube. Maybe I shouldn't have read those. But like, it's I don't see like he literally used the phrase "take back control" when asked about some Brexit stuff. Literally flogged that. I was quite surprised that he was still just singing that song. It doesn't need to anymore. It's done.
It's done. Brexit is done. Get it done.
Oh, and things. He cited some sort of vague example of something that was immeasurably better because of the lack of Brussels bureaucracy, and I just go, all right. I really don't see how Brexiting supports any of this. It comes back to values. The fact that you think that it's important to have borders and then have competitive advantage of an individual country, individual person versus other people is somehow a really important value to have, and therefore Brexit and therefore this. And I just disagree with you. Hopefully we're not just retreading the same thing.
No, but I think I often talk about or quote things my father did as a way, attribute some of my characteristics to things my father either said or made me do or whatever when I was a kid. One of the things he did often say to me was, Ivanka, as clever as you are equally stupid. And I think being aware that you are not omni clever, just because you're good at a few things does not mean that you are universally and omnipotently clever, I think is worth being conscious of.
And I had an I Ching reading that kind of said the same thing the other week. An I Ching reading. It just sort of said I can see that there's some people watching. There's 5 viewers, so I kind of I think it's good to have some sort of dice mechanic in your life because you can't do everything rationally. So I chose the I Ching, which is a book where you throw some coins and it gives you some ancient wisdom, randomly selected, but it usually seems to be eerily appropriate to what you're doing because it's the horoscope. But this one, it was saying go sort of be as a child kind of thing. Remember that you're stupid. And the way to remember that is just because you are, compared to the oracle, you are but a child. Just remember that. Compared to the wisdom of the oracle, the universe, you are. And I was like, yeah, it's true. It's so easy to think that you're such a clever person and you know all you need to know. It's really important to sometimes come back and go, no, how could I possibly know a fraction of what is going on in the universe? I can't. So I need to have that humility, and not that I do. I'm not saying I do, but it's good to be reminded.
I'm very good at it.
It's good to be reminded of this, and it's good to at least try to sort of reset yourself once in a while. Go, hey, I'm just some guy with a particular set of experiences.
I think humility is a massively undervalued characteristic of a human. It's so much easier.
Strange that it would be absent in people that had clawed their way to power.
Peculiar.
Should we round it up?
I think so.
Are we done?
I think
okay.
It's been.
right, thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, you can go to grandpodcast.com and find out more. There's 160 more episodes of this. And this is only like the fourth one we've done live, and the old ones are edited, so there's still but I think these ones are pretty good. To start off with, it needed to be edited, but because we weren't so used to sort of talking with momentum. But yeah, there's some older episodes. We talk about all sorts of death, politics, Brexit
stuff,
all that kind of thing. We also talked about food and bitcoins. So we've got loads of subjects. So grandpodcast.com. If you want to see the video of this and you missed the Twitch stream, it's up on YouTube, but it's via Patreon. So if you go to the website, if you go to grandpodcast.com and click on a video, it's going to say, hey, if patrons can watch this, and you can give us like $1 a month or whatever, or $3 or something, and then you can be part of the team. Get the email. You get the email summary, which has all the links in it. You get all the links emailed to you where you might actually click on them. And you also get to join our Slack. Where can people find you on the internet, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on the Twitter.
That's a good username. That must have led to some interesting podcast interviews this week.
It did indeed.
That
was an old one.
Famous
for being called Ivanka.
At Ivanka on Twitter. If you can find me at Michael Forrest on Twitter. And you can also come to goodtohear.co.uk to see all the stuff I'm building, because I'm a weirdo. Build stuff, and I'm very agile and lean, and I make stuff. Yeah, I'm a maverick, just like Dominic Cummings once. Like, the first time I came across Dominic Cummings was because I got a call from a recruiter saying the Leave campaign is making this iPad app. Are you interested? I was like,
and you went,
WTF? No, I was just shocked that they were using that some people with those values would even understand technology. And little did I know that this was actually how they pulled it all off. So
wow.
I tweeted him, because it was the first person I'd found that actually seemed to know anything that was pro-Brexit. So I was like, oh god. I would not like to join his team. Anyway, that's the point, and I said so in no uncertain terms. And then I thought, maybe I should have been more Cajun and joined in and done some journalism on it, and been like an infiltrator. But I wasn't quick enough thinking, so never mind. But yeah, that's all for this week. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
God. I haven't